Germany has told the United States it must apply more pressure on Russia to end its war on Ukraine. The German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has been holding talks with President Donald Trump at the Oval Office. He says he's hoping to keep the US on board with Western support for Ukraine and help defuse trade tensions. In his opening remarks, Merz said Trump was key to ending the Ukraine war. However, Donald Trump said Ukraine and Russia might need to fight on for longer.
May I remind you that we are having June 6 tomorrow. This is D-Day anniversary, when the Americans once ended a war in Europe. And I think this is in your hand in specific, in ours.
That was not a pleasant day for you?
No, that was not a pleasant...
This was not a great day.
In the long run, Mr. President, this was the liberation of my country from Nazi dictatorship.
That's true. That's true.
And we know what we owe you. But this is the reason why I'm saying that America is again in a very strong position to do something on this war and ending this war. So let's talk about what we can do jointly, and we are ready to do what we can. And you know that we gave support to Ukraine, and that we are looking for more pressure on Russia. The European Union did, and we should talk about that.
Sometimes you see two young children fighting like crazy. They hate each other and they're fighting in a park. And you try and pull them apart. They don't want to be pulled. Sometimes you're better off letting them fight for a while and then pulling them apart. And I gave that analogy to Putin yesterday. I said, President, maybe you're going to have to keep fighting and suffering a lot, because both sides are suffering, before you pull them apart, before they're able to be pulled apart.
Well, ahead of that meeting with Chancellor Merz, Trump had a long-awaited phone call with China's leader, Xi Jinping. It's the first time the two leaders have spoken since Donald Trump returned to office and imposed sweeping tariffs on Chinese goods.
We had a very good talk, and we've straightened out any complexity. It's very complex stuff, and we straightened it out. The agreement was we're going to have Scott and Howard and Jameson will be going and meeting with their top people and continue it forward. But no, I think we have everything. I think we're in very good shape with China and the trade deal. We have a deal with China, as you know, but we were straightening out some of the points, having to do mostly with rare earth, magnets, and some other things.
Well, we can discuss both stories with Al Jazeera's White House correspondent Kimbley Hulit, who is live in Washington. Kimberly, let's start with the meeting between the two leaders, the German Chancellor and Donald Trump. Chancellor Merz, while he was extremely friendly with the US, President did push back when it came to the Ukraine war. Talk to us about that a little.
Yeah, he made 2 points. The first is that he believes it's the U.S. that needs to take the lead on the resolution or attempt to get a ceasefire between Vladimir Putin and Vladimir Zelensky and the respective countries that are in conflict. The second is that it's very clear that the German Chancellor believes that the pressure needs to be put on Russia. He said that he believes that Russia is targeting civilians while Ukraine is targeting in its attacks military and infrastructure. And so given the difference, it's very clear, as well as in the financial support. We know that Germany gives military support in terms of financial dollars. The U.S., it's a question mark whether they will after the end of this year. There is this feeling that the U.S. president is really looking at this with both sides in that conflict playing an equal role, despite the fact that we know Russia did invade Ukraine.
And the other headline we're looking at today, Kimberly, is this phone call that took place between President Donald Trump and Xi Jinping of China. What more did we learn about that phone call, and why is it so significant?
It's significant because the U.S. president seems to believe it's a fait accompli. In other words, everything's fine and it's all been worked out. But if we look at the readout from China, that doesn't appear to be the case. The U.S. president saying that things have been worked out, straightened out, that their respective teams are going to meet, and that really they just had to get some fine details on the issue of China's control over the halting of rare earths, which has been an issue for the manufacturing in the U.S. and around the world of jets and vehicles, etc. But when we hear from Xi Jinping, his readout is different. It says that the U.S. needs to implement and utilize the trade measures that exist currently. In other words, that they believe there are still differences. And you can understand why, because the U.S. has on Chinese imports into the United States has tariffs of some 30%, whereas in the reverse, U.S. products to China are subject to just 10% tariffs. That was something worked out in Geneva in May. And so clearly there is a bit of a disparity between those two numbers. They're not equal. And it seems to be the goal of China's president to try and rectify that.
OK, thank you for that. Al Jazeera's White House correspondent, Kimbley Hulit.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.